She's unstable, my mother-in-law told the mediator, loud enough that I could hear her through the frosted glass partition. She has always been unstable. Ask anyone in the family. Ask my son. I sat on the other side of that partition with my hands folded in my lap and said nothing. My lawyer put a gentle hand on my forearm. I already knew something she didn't. Let me back up. I work as a forensic auditor for a mid-sized firm based in Mississauga. I know that sounds dry. People hear auditor and they picture someone in a beige cardigan pushing paper under fluorescent lights. The reality is that I spend most of my time finding money that someone tried to make disappear. Fraud cases, estate disputes, insurance claims. I am very good at finding things people want hidden. I have been doing it for 11 years. My daughter Piper is 7 now. She has her father's dark hair and my stubborn streak, and she is, without question, the best thing I have ever done with my life. When she was 4, her father and I separated. It wasn't dramatic, no screaming, no throwing things. It was just a slow, quiet realization that we had become two people who were very polite to each other and nothing else. We divided everything fairly. I thought we were going to be one of those functional divorced couples you read about in parenting blogs. I did not account for his mother. My mother-in-law, who I will call exactly what she is, a woman who had controlled her son's entire life since the day he was born and was not prepared to stop, decided that the divorce was my fault, that Piper was being used as a weapon against her family, and that I was, in her words, a cold woman who never deserved to be part of this family in the first place. She said that at Easter dinner 2 months after we separated, in front of my daughter, Piper was eating a dinner roll and looked up at her grandmother with those big, dark eyes, confused, and my ex-husband said nothing. He just looked at his plate. That was the moment I understood what the next few years were going to look like. For a while, I absorbed it. I told myself Piper needed her father's family. I told myself I was being the bigger person. I arranged pickups and drop-offs with military precision, kept my tone neutral in every text message, never said a word against them in front of Piper. I drove 40 minutes each way to accommodate their schedule changes. I rearranged my own client meetings. Once, I left a deposition early, something I had never done in my career, because my former mother-in-law called to say she needed to drop Piper off 2 hours early and couldn't wait. My own mother had passed when Piper was 2. My dad remarried and moved to Kelowna. I didn't have that cushion of extended family, that backup rotation of people who show up. It was me and Piper, and whatever arrangement I'd pieced together with a babysitter named Mrs. Ashworth, who lived 3 streets over and smelled like lavender and always had the news on too loud. Piper's 5th birthday was a Saturday in April. I had booked a small party room at the rec center in our neighborhood, the one with the rainbow parachute and the foam pit that kids lose their minds over. 12 kids from her junior kindergarten class, a cake shaped like a hedgehog because that was her obsession that year. I had made the invitations myself on my kitchen table at 11 at night after she was asleep, cutting little hedgehog shapes out of brown cardstock with craft scissors. Her father's family RSVP'd, yes, all of them. His mother, his sister's husband, their 2 kids. 6 people. I set up chairs for them. I printed name tags. I bought the brand of juice boxes his mother preferred because she had once, at Christmas, made a comment about the other kind having too much sugar. They didn't come. No call. No text. Nothing. I found out later, through my ex-husband's cousin, of all people, who felt guilty enough to mention it, that his sister had surprised everyone with a last-minute trip to Niagara-on-the-Lake that weekend, a spa package, a wine tour. His mother had decided it sounded lovely. Piper asked me 4 times that afternoon where her grandma was. The first time, I said they must be running late. The second time, I said there was probably traffic on the QEW. The third time, she stopped asking and just looked at the door. The 4th time wasn't really a question. She just said, "They're not coming, are they, Mom?" And it wasn't even her sad voice. It was her resigned voice. A 5-year-old should not have a resigned voice. I cut the hedgehog cake. I smiled until my face hurt. I played the parachute game and I cheered louder than any other parent in that room. After the last kid left and Mrs. Ashworth took Piper home so I could clean up, I sat in that empty party room with deflated balloons and half-eaten cake, and I cried for about 10 minutes. Then I stopped because I had an early morning and crying doesn't audit anything. 3 weeks later, my ex-husband called me. His mother wanted to do a belated birthday celebration for Piper. Could I bring her over Sunday? I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for exactly 2 days. Then I sent a card to his mother's address in Oakville. Inside the card, I had written a short note. It said that we appreciated the thought, and that Piper was always happy to see family who showed up for her. I tucked $1 inside, a single loonie. I sealed it and sent it with a first-class stamp. My ex-husband called me the next day absolutely furious. His mother had called him crying. What was the meaning of this? Was I trying to humiliate her? Did I understand how hurtful this was? I told him I thought it was a generous gesture given the circumstances. He told me his mother had been going through a difficult time, that the Niagara trip had been planned for months, that I needed to extend more grace to his family. I asked him if he had been there when Piper stopped asking about them at her own birthday party. He didn't answer that. What I hadn't told him, what I hadn't told anyone, was that 3 months earlier, my firm had been quietly retained to assist with a civil fraud case involving a numbered company registered in Ontario. I can't get into specifics even now, but the short version is that the case involved inflated contractor invoices, misappropriated funds from a private real estate development partnership, and a paper trail that had been deliberately obscured through a series of intercompany transfers. Standard stuff in my line of work. I had been assigned as the lead auditor. About 6 weeks into the engagement, I pulled a corporate registry search that stopped me cold. My former brother-in-law. My ex-husband's sister's husband, a man I had sat across from at Christmas dinners for 7 years, a man who had once borrowed my copy of the Costco membership card and never returned it, was listed as a silent partner in one of the shell companies at the center of the investigation. I stared at that document for a long time. I want to be clear about something. I did not choose to be on that case. I did not go looking for it. The conflict of interest review process at my firm is thorough, and I had disclosed my family connection to my supervising partner immediately. He reviewed the disclosure, consulted with our legal team, and determined that because my ex-husband's family was not a named party at that stage, only the numbered company was, there was no conflict requiring my removal. He documented everything. I kept every email. I also kept doing my job. The Loonie card had been sent before any of this fully materialized. I want to be honest about that. At the time I sent it, it was just what it looked like. A quiet, deliberate response to a family that had stood up my daughter on her birthday. I wasn't playing a long game. I wasn't setting anything up. I was a tired single mother who had run out of grace to extend. But sometimes things converge in ways you don't plan. By late fall, the investigation had expanded. More partners had been identified. The numbered company had been used to funnel development funds through a series of invoices from a contractor that, according to our analysis, had performed significantly less work than billed. In some cases, the contractor appeared to have done no work at all. The total misappropriated amount was somewhere in the range of $800,000 Canadian. My former brother-in-law's name was no longer peripheral. That winter was strange. Piper and I had a good Christmas. Just the two of us plus my dad who flew in from Kelowna and Mrs. Ashworth who joined us for dinner and fell asleep in the armchair by 9. I made a standing rib roast and we watched old holiday movies and Piper got the art set she'd been asking for since September. It was quiet and warm and entirely ours. Meanwhile, my ex-husband's family was apparently having a very different kind of winter. I heard things through the cousin. She was a kind woman and couldn't help herself. That his sister and her husband were going through something. That there had been a meeting with lawyers. that his mother had been over at their house almost every night, that his father, a quiet man I had always liked, had stopped going to his regular Friday golf game at the Brampton Club. I said nothing. I went to work. I finalized my portion of the report. In February, the case moved to litigation. The statement of claim was filed in Ontario Superior Court. My former brother-in-law was named. His company was named. The amount sought was substantial. The original $800,000 plus interest, plus legal costs, plus damages for breach of fiduciary duty. My role as auditor meant I would be called as an expert witness. I remember the morning I got the subpoena. I was standing in my kitchen in socks, making Piper's lunch, cheese and crackers, apple slices, a note shaped like a star that I tucked into the front pocket of her bag every day, which she claimed to find embarrassing, but which I noticed she never threw away. I opened the envelope, read it, set it on the counter next to the peanut-free granola bars. Then I called my lawyer. The mediation session was scheduled for late March. Both sides in the civil case were attempting to negotiate a settlement before trial. I was not a party to the settlement. I was there in my capacity as the auditor whose work was at the center of the financial claims, but I would be present to answer questions about my methodology, which is how I ended up sitting on one side of a frosted glass partition while my ex-husband's mother told a mediator that I was unstable. She hadn't known I was there. I had come in through a different entrance, been directed to a waiting area, and was seated before either side had fully assembled. By the time she arrived with her son, her daughter's husband, and two separate lawyers, I was already in the room. She saw me and her face did something complicated. I looked at her calmly. When the mediator opened the session and explained the roles of all parties present, I watched her whisper something to one of her lawyers. He looked at his notes. He looked at me. He leaned over and said something to the other lawyer. There was a brief, hushed conference that I wasn't privy to, but that my own legal team observed with some interest. The mediator, a composed woman in her 50s, named Justice Beaumont Clark, who had stepped down from the bench to do private dispute resolution, looked across the table and asked the opposing counsel a question. She asked it in a measured, even tone. Are you familiar with the professional history of the expert witness your client is attempting to characterize? There was a pause. Because I am, she said. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The room went very still. I had testified as an expert witness in Ontario courts 14 times. My reports had been cited in 3 published decisions. I had been called to assist on 2 CRA investigations. My firm's methodology, which I had helped develop, was considered a standard reference in forensic accounting circles in this province. Justice Beaumont Clark had, as it turned out, cited one of my reports in a decision she had written 4 years earlier, before her retirement from the bench. The opposing counsel said nothing. My ex-mother-in-law looked at me from across the table. Her face had gone the color of old chalk. Beside her, her daughter had her hands flat on the table and was staring at a fixed point somewhere past my left shoulder. Her husband, my former brother-in-law, was looking at the surface of the table as if he was trying to memorize the grain of the wood. The mediation took most of the day. I am not able to speak to the terms. What I can tell you is that when I walked out of that building at 6:15 in the evening, the sun was still up. That particular pale gold March sun you only get in Ontario when the snow has just melted and the air still has a bite in it, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and just breathed. I picked Piper up from Mrs. Ashworth's at 7. She had macaroni on her shirt and was very energized about a book she'd taken out of the school library about migratory birds. She talked the whole drive home. She talked through dinner. She talked while I was braiding her hair before bed. I tucked her in and sat on the edge of her mattress in the dark for a while. She said, "Mom, are you okay?" I said I was great. She said, "You look like when something good happened but you're also tired." I said, "That's exactly what it is." She accepted this and closed her eyes. My ex-husband's family does not contact me anymore, not directly. Arrangements for Piper go through a parenting coordinator now, a practical woman who books everything on a shared calendar and does not permit last-minute changes without documentation. Piper sees her father regularly. She's doing well. She's in second grade and has a best friend named, well, she'd kill me if I used her real name. And they are obsessed with making slime and watching nature documentaries and apparently starting a podcast, though the details of this project are classified. I did not go back to that firm. 18 months after the case closed, I left to start my own practice. 3 associates, 1 admin. We are very busy. The Loonie is still on my desk. I kept it, a duplicate of the one I sent. I fish it out sometimes when a file is particularly complicated, when a paper trail seems impossible to follow, when I am tired and the numbers are swimming and I can't see where the money went. It reminds me that the smallest, most precisely aimed thing can be the one that changes everything, and that some people, no matter how loud they are in the room, have already lost by the time you sit down. I still think about that party room sometimes, the deflated balloons, the hedgehog cake with 2 slices missing, Piper's voice when she stopped asking if they were coming. Not crying, just quiet, in a way no 5-year-old should be quiet. People ask me if I planned it. If I knew, when I slipped that Loonie into the envelope, what was coming, I didn't. I want to be honest about that. I was just a tired woman who had run out of ways to pretend that being treated badly was something I needed to accommodate. The dollar wasn't strategy. It was the last small, precise thing I had left to say. But here's what I've come to understand about the way things unfold. The people who treat others carelessly tend to assume everyone around them is equally careless. They skip a child's birthday because they don't believe there will be a real cost. They dismiss a woman in a mediation room because they've never bothered to learn who she actually is. They build their confidence on the assumption that the people they've underestimated will stay underestimated. What they don't account for is someone who has spent 11 years learning how to follow a paper trail. Someone who showed up every single day to work, to Piper's school pickups, to the party room with a hedgehog cake, even when it would have been easier not to. There's a kind of integrity in that, I think, not the dramatic kind. The quiet, unglamorous kind that doesn't announce itself. You just keep doing the right thing, the careful thing, the honest thing, long enough that when a moment arrives, and it does arrive, you are already standing exactly where you need to be. I didn't go after my former brother-in-law. I audited a file. I did my job with the same rigor I always bring to it, and I disclosed every conflict the moment it appeared. What happened next was the result of choices he had made long before I ever entered that room. That's the part people sometimes miss when they hear a story like this. The consequences were always coming. I just happened to be the one holding the documentation. Piper's in second grade now. She made a card for Mrs. Ashworth last week. A drawing of 2 people sitting at a table eating macaroni, which is apparently high realism in her artistic style. She doesn't talk about that birthday. I don't think she remembers the details the way I do. Kids are like that. They feel things deeply and then they move forward, because they haven't yet learned to carry things the way adults do. I'm trying to learn that from her, honestly. The Loonie on my desk isn't there to remind me of what happened to my former in-laws. It's there to remind me that the smallest, most carefully considered action, taken with a clear head and a steady hand, can matter more than the loudest thing in the room. That doing your work well is its own kind of answer. That showing up for your kid, even when you're exhausted, even when it hurts, is never wasted. Some people lose things because of the choices they made. Some people build things because of the choices they made. The distance between those 2 outcomes is mostly just consistency over time when no one is watching.